is Norwich Confidential with your hosts, Dr. Ben Hong, Bonnie Hong, and Mr. Bob Farwell.
Good evening, and like they said, and then there is one, and that means that I'm the only one here tonight. We are live, Norwich Confidential, and we are going to talk about a lot of current issues, and not just what's happening in Norwich, but as well as what's happening all over the world. Now, before we get started, very important thing that's close to me, and that would be the Manny Pacquiao and Mayweather fight, which will be about 9 days from now. And I just want to let you know that Manny Pacquiao actually came from the region of where we used to live in the Philippines. And I remember the very first time I heard him fight, and that he happened to win that big fight, and that was the beginning of his popularity. But he literally was like a hero or a saint in the Philippines. I mean, they had huge parade just for his victory, the very first time that he fought in an international setting against a Mexican boxer. So since then, he's been very successful, and I tried to see his fight live. Sometimes, of course, it's almost always pay-per-view, but it's a very interesting fight. And I realize that a lot of people will probably say that boxing should be banned because of the brain concussions and so on. And unfortunately, it is a sport, and I think they just need to really tighten up some of the rules. And a lot of people are saying that this is probably one of the biggest fights. So again, I think it's May 2nd. That's Manny Pacquiao and Mayweather, and it's probably worth getting a ticket to one of those pay-per-view. And most likely we will not see any kind of any type of fight like that, because like right now, our heavyweight champion is somebody from Russia, I think, or something like that, and we don't see the sport as being as glamorous or as exciting as it used to be. So of course, I'm putting my support on Pacquiao, because he came from the same place I came from, that I grew up with, and he, of course, had got to become also a good politician, and he had done a lot of good works in the Philippines, and by donating some of his money and training a lot of kids and so on, and that brings up the rewards that somebody will have when they get popular. But the most important thing is to return some of that to the community and to the people that you came from. And that is how I look at Manny Pacquiao. As far as Mayweather is concerned, I think he's a very good promoter. He is a good fighter. And some of the fighters that he had fought in the past, like Oscar de la Hoya and all the champions in the past, were also quite good. Unfortunately, some of those fighters were already past their prime. Unfortunately, this fight between Pacquiao and Mayweather did not happen 7 or maybe 5 years ago, which I thought would have been really fun. But be as it may, at least the two of them are going to meet, and it will settle the score as to exactly who's the best in that weight. Now, it's not going to be like Muhammad Ali and Frazier, where they will have 3 or 4 return matches. I think with Pacquiao and Mayweather, I think it's just going to be a one-time deal, because both of them are aging, and I think there are going to be some younger boxers that are going to come around, and probably will knock them out if they are going to fight them. But it's probably once in a lifetime thing. We say that a lot about seeing a sport, that it's going to be one in a lifetime thing, but you very seldom will actually appreciate that. And it is just like football. Those are one in a lifetime thing. I remembered watching live because myself and Bonnie went to see a Super Bowl game at that time. That was a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago, between the New York Giants and Denver Broncos. And You have to be there to realize the excitement of what these games are like. It's very, very different from what you see on television. The same thing as baseball and basketball. You have to be in the arena to appreciate exactly what it is like to be there. So, just want to remind you again, May 2nd, that's the Manny Pacquiao and Mayweather fight. Now, Bonnie will be here soon, hopefully, and she'll be talking a lot of things today. Now, there's a few things that's coming up for, I would say, maybe for a vote, and one of that would be, of course, what Bonnie is so excited about, and that's the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And for all we care, we probably don't hear anything about this. I obviously read about that from WikiLeaks, and so there are a lot of things that's about what this whole thing is all about. But this is a partnership among Pacific Rim countries. Japan is one of them, and with the United States, and it looks like that the corporations that's going to be in this partnership is going to be controlling something like 40% of all the global economy. And not only that, but these corporations are going to be so powerful that even the nations that they are or that they belong to actually cannot make any laws to regulate them, and so they become quite powerful. And of course, what we hear before is that, well, it's good for the economy and so on, but the problem, of course, is that the economy is only as good as the workers that are in that country, and if we do not have our workers working for these companies or corporations, then we will be losing the income and the jobs from these workers. But we will, of course, become the consumer. So this is a place where they will sell the products, and we end up basically as like we are now, just nothing more than a consumer market, and we won't be doing the production. So this is one of the things, and I'd like you to continue watching it, because the President Obama is really pushing this partnership, and it's almost like a monopoly of a group of people, the noblemen in the kingdom, that they hold all the cards, and you know, we talked about the 1%. Well, this is going to be less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
And it will be almost like an exclusive club that they will forever hold, because they cannot be touched by any countries that they are in sign with. So here comes Bonnie, and she will probably give you some more insight as to what this is that I'm talking about.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Yes.
Yes. I apologize for being late, and I'm going to owe Ben Hong a really big apology after the show, but the Trans-Pacific Partnership is such a dangerous piece of legislation for our democracy that I'm glad that Ben brought it up. We are planning to have a guest in a couple of weeks. I'm hoping from the State Department of Labor to talk about the impact that NAFTA had on our economy. And the Trans-Pacific Partnership is really NAFTA on steroids, and so we're looking forward to that. But tonight, we would like to start tonight's show is what I think Ben and I both consider to be the #1 critical issue, and that's climate change. I think we'll start the discussion out, though, by bringing a little humor to a most serious problem. We found this very short video. It's John Oliver's explanation of really what climate change is. So we're going to go to the video first.
Yeah, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
He will explain it like we're all 5 years old.
The Earth. You may know it as that blue thing Bruce Willis is always trying to save. Or from its famous collaboration with wind and fire. Or just simply as that place where George Clooney lives. Anyway, the Earth had some genuinely bad news this week.
A White House report that says global warming threatens every part of the U.S.
This isn't something in the distant future. Climate change is already affecting us now.
Now. Smart move, Obama. That is a key shift in how to talk about climate change, because we've all proven that we cannot be trusted with the future tense. We've been repeatedly asked, don't you want to leave a better Earth for your grandchildren? And we've all collectively responded, fuck them. But incredibly, this latest damning scientific report may still face an uphill climb with some of us.
There's that Gallup poll that came out last month, which found 1 in 4 Americans is skeptical of all the effects of climate change and thinks this issue's been exaggerated.
Who gives a shit? That doesn't matter. You don't need people's opinions on a fact. You might as well have a poll asking which number is bigger, 15 or 5? Or do owls exist? Or are there hats? The debate on climate change should not be whether or not it exists, it's what we should do about it. There is a mountain of research on this topic. Global temperatures are rising, heat waves are becoming more common, sea surface temperatures are also rising, glaciers are melting, and of course no climate report is complete without the obligatory photo of a polar bear balancing on a piece of ice. The only accurate way to report that 1 out of 4 Americans are skeptical of global warming is to say, a poll finds that 1 out of 4 Americans are wrong about something. Because a survey of thousands of scientific papers that took a position on climate change found that 97% endorsed the position that humans are causing global warming. And I think I know why people still think this issue is open to debate, because on TV, it is. And it's always 1 person for, 1 person against. And it's usually the same person for.
Bill Nye and Marsha Blackburn, welcome both of you to Meet the Press.
Bill Nye joins us now, along with climate change skeptic Mark Morano.
Joining me now to go head-to-head, Bill Nye, science educator and CEO of the Planetary Society.
In the crossfire, Bill Nye, the science guy.
Bill Nye, the science guy who believes in man-made global warming.
Yeah, that's right. More often than not, it's Bill Nye, the science guy, versus some dude. And when you look at the screen, it's 50-50, which is inherently misleading. If there has to be a debate about the reality of climate change, and there doesn't, then there is only one mathematically fair way to do it.
Last Week Tonight presents a statistically representative climate change debate.
Good evening. Joining me tonight, a climate change denier and, naturally, Bill Nye science guy. Bill.
John?
Yep.
Humans are causing climate change? No question.
Wait. Before we begin, in the interest of mathematical balance, I'm going to bring out 2 people who agree with you, climate skeptic, and Bill Nye, I'm also going to bring out 96 other scientists. It's a little unwieldy, but this is the only way you can actually have a representative discussion. So, yeah, please file in. Again, this is going to make the debate difficult. We shouldn't really be having it in the first place. But, so, representationally, climate skeptic, please make a case against climate change.
Well, I just don't think all the science is in yet. It's settled.
Okay, and what is the overwhelming view of the entire scientific community? Okay. Any response to that? Any response? I can't hear you over the weight of scientific evidence. This whole debate should not have happened. I apologise to everyone at home. My thanks to Bill Nye and the overwhelming scientific consensus.
So, well, that seems to be a very easy way of explaining what climate change has done to, to the opinion of a lot of people. And I remember that last fall that we participated in that march in New York City on climate change.
When you're in a crowd of almost 500,000 people,
yes,
and the streets you're walking on, from apartment building to apartment building, the whole street is just packed. And as far north as you can see and as far south as you can see, there are people marching and trying to bring attention to this. And still, what have we done?
Well, those are the people that are voicing their opinion that there is really something that needs to be done because there's such a climate change. But then, of course, if 1 million people march in New York City, what about the 11 million people, the silent majority that did not march?
Yeah, well, the ones that don't believe in climate change.
That's right.
But I think that I read an article today about how, because today is Earth Day, so if you have any kind of an email account, you're going to find a lot of emails in there announcing today's Earth Day and what we should be doing and all of this. But one of the ones that came into me was, again, like John Oliver, bringing a little bit of sense of humor to this really serious issue. But they said that we can all rest easy because the years of worrying about catastrophic climate change are now over. It turns out we're all wrong. But don't thank the climate scientists and all their data and their rigorous analysis. No, it's none other than James Inhofe. Now, he is the new chair of the Senate Environmental Committee, and he discovered the definitive proof that it's all a hoax. Because here we have our chief legislator in, wait a minute,
you're
but you
putting
have
a dig on the Republican Party now.
I didn't even mention what party he was
he's
from.
a chair. And
he is the chair.
Who do you think is the majority now? And,
okay.
So
but
basically,
he's in charge of the Environmental Committee. And this past February, he walked outside and discovered that frozen water was falling from the sky. They had an ice storm. You know, the hail was coming down. And in the middle of winter, this was happening. So he brought his discovery onto the Senate floor, and there's actually a photograph of him standing up on the Senate floor with his great big ice cube. And he made, and just to make his point, that it's too bad we weren't able to gather all, well, I mean, his point was, how can we have global warming and look at this ice? This is what we have here in February in Washington, D.C.
Well, before you move on, that's basically something like logic that people will say, what? We are having climate change, that there's global warming. Just look at the past winter. We get snowstorm almost like every week.
Severe snowstorms, right.
But it's too bad that our daughter is not here, because she was able to explain this whole thing very, very succinctly. And I told her that I was probably a 5-year-old and I still understood how she explained it. And so if she does come in sometime, we'll have her explain as to why in the Northeast or in the Atlantic seaboard that there's such a high
incidence of
the snowstorm,
severe storms, whether they're thunderstorms,
and what is going, what do you mean by climate warming and so on and so on, when there's not even a sign of spring or something, summer yet, and so on. So that would be something that she can explain. But indeed, when you look at what is happening, you see this huge glacier coming down and falling off, and that very poor polar bear into this tiny ice floating around. You say, oh gee, what's been happening? Well, a lot of people, and especially the deniers, will say, well, this is just a natural course of the earth, and that basically this is the cycle. And then on the other side, people will say, well, it's because we're doing this to ourselves. Well, the thing is this, that no matter what we do or don't do, and there is going to be a change in climate here, and we all burn to crisp, the earth will survive. It will continue on for another billion of years.
The earth will.
And the earth will be here just like it had always been over several million years ago. It's just that we are just a different tenant and living temporarily in this earth. And that brings me up to the story as to why are we still here when there are just too many of us and we just cannot support ourselves. And so the burden is upon the earth. And if you have flown a plane across the Amazon, and you will see those huge forests bare out and so on, and that really is an amazing thing to see, because you can actually see what we are doing to the planet. Or
and,
if you
the effects, and that is what I think most people really don't understand. you know, most of us live day to day. If you could put the camera on both of us, that would probably be helpful. Can you do that, please? But the effect of all of this, the devastation of cutting down the trees that actually absorb carbon dioxide, and you know, I mean that again allows the increase in carbon dioxide to remain in the atmosphere. The melting, you talked about the melting of the Arctic ice. That's really where global warming is coming in, because the temperature of the Earth is literally heating up. You have these pockets of methane. Remember we saw that article about the methane cloud over the Southwest? The size of the cloud, can I ask one more time, can we put both of us on camera? Just, okay, all right.
Well, you know, there's also one thing about what you're saying is that, well, you cut down trees and that releases carbon dioxide. Well, you create more people and we absorb carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, we don't live longer than trees. So overall, we're in negative balance because the carbon dioxide will just kind of stay just a few years in our body. And not only that, but we make methane also. So when you have people going all over the place,
our methane is
so
not
we make
producing,
more methane than
yes, our methane is
natural.
not producing the methane cloud that's in the Southwest. But that's the real danger. I think people now understand somewhat about carbon dioxide, but the methane is more difficult to understand. Yet it was, at the end of the last 10 minutes of our show, we're going to get very serious, and you'll have a very good scientific explanation of why this extinction, and which is what it's going to become if nothing happens, is different than the past 5 extinctions that have occurred on the planet.
Well, there's actually 6 extinctions now, and we will be the 7th. But that is the natural history of this planet. But like I said, no matter what we do and don't do, the Earth will survive.
But the other extinctions were created, except for the one with the meteor that created that extinction event. The others were actually caused, again, still by global warming, by heating, because of the volcanoes. Our Earth was very young at that point, so that you had all the eruptions of volcanoes. You had the explosion of all of that, those gases that, again, it did exactly what our carbon dioxide and methane are doing, heating the Earth by blanketing it. But underneath all of the glaciers, we have huge pockets of methane. And as the ice begins to melt, we're giving those methane pockets areas where they can erupt. And I'm not a scientist. I wish I could explain it better. Where the methane goes up into the atmosphere and really creates a very fast climate change.
Well, it's no different than anything else, because whether you like it or not, it's already here. It's just a question of how soon will it kill us all. And well, you might as well spend all your money and dig all the oil you can, burn it and enjoy it, because pretty soon the Earth is going to be like Mars. So who cares by that time?
But don't you think that there is some bit of willful ignorance in us?
It's called bliss. Ignorance is bliss.
Where we're just too happy and content with all the things that we get from burning fossil fuels.
Like what we do all the time. I mean, you know, it's pleasure-driven type of existence. So I'll spend all my money on credit cards and everything. Hey.
And so the debt gets higher and all these other...
That is the policy.
But I think that I remember when I first saw that one photograph that NASA published on the methane cloud, because there is obviously a lot of oil rigs and drilling for oil in those areas, and rather than collect all that methane, all these oil wells just kind of let the methane just go off into the air.
Yeah.
I mean, methane does have a use, but...
I'm not a denier of climate change. As a matter of fact, I agree that there is a climate change, but at the same time, I'm not going to fret over it. I'm not going to be sad about it. Or
now you do. Are you giving me the other side?
So
well, I think that
we'll all get burned, and everything is going to be like the Sahara Desert. Which, by the way, if you've been there, it does rain in the desert, and when it rains, it's very cold. So, no, the desert is the desert, and it will be very hot during the daytime. Temperature can get up to 120, 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and at night it can be freezing. And so you can imagine what it's going to be like.
It's going to, but that's with the temperatures today. And what they've already have shown is that when we get to like another 2 to 3 degree increase, at that point, we've kind of reached a tipping point where it can't be reversed.
Well, we already have passed that tipping point.
You think we have?
Yes, we did, a long time ago. I mean, you can see that basically the ocean water is warmer, and basically...
It's more acidic?
It's more, well, it's just the temperature, it's warm, because that absorbs the temperature. So it's just like you're trying to boil a pot of water. It takes some time to really make that water get to that boiling point. But when you heat up that water, the temperature rises, and then you cannot just switch it off and think that, well, the water is going to cool down immediately. No, it's going to continue the heat that's rising, and that is what's going to happen. The ocean temperature is going up, and it's releasing the heat into the atmosphere, and we're having some huge greenhouse effect, so that in China you'll see a whole river that is green with vegetation, because boy, they love those heat and they love those organic materials that's in the river. So
but it also kills off a lot of the animal life in our oceans.
Well, in that part of the ocean, so we might as well enjoy it and harvest everything that we can. Rather than have the nature kill themselves.
He says that, I think, for just for the benefit of the show, because he did already tell you how he went out and marched for the climate change march. So you can say that and say, yeah, you don't care, and
there were some
you're not going to do.
grandmothers, and I wonder why they were marching, because hey,
it's happening though, and they recognize it. And that's part of the problem. I mean, when we look at, like in California today, again, they have never had this type of a drought in the last 1,200 years. That was the last time this type of a drought occurred in California. You have the same thing happening in Brazil. In Sao Paulo, the reservoir is almost, I mean, there's only 5% of the water. 5%. You look at pictures and all you see is the dust and cracked dirt. And that reservoir is supposed to take care of how many millions of people in Sao Paulo?
Yeah, well, Bonnie, again, if it is not happening in my backyard, nobody will believe it. So that basically, yeah, they can see that. They can see that the Sahara Desert is getting wider and bigger, and temperatures are getting higher. But hey, it's not in my backyard, so why do I care?
You think that that's really...
All of those basically are areas that are absorbing the heat, and they're releasing carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide basically stays in the atmosphere, and basically it allows the rays of the sun and ultraviolet light of the sun to come through. So hey, we're going to die sometime, and all of us have to go sometime. We might as well go all at once.
That doesn't mean we want to see our grandchildren go with us, you know, or our great-grandchildren. And that's what I think most people really don't understand, is that this, if we don't take drastic steps right now, we are looking at an extinction event.
Well, evolution, Bunny.
So
there will be an evolution. So there will be some organism in the future that will really survive, not just survive, but flourish on this type of climate. I mean, you know, salt water, they'll drink it like crazy, and acid water, oh yeah, they love that. And ultraviolet lights, oh, they use that for so evolution.
But part of the problem right now, today, we talked about the climate change conference that was taking place on a show several months ago. Remember, we talked about the climate change conference, and yet they talk a lot about it. But in the United States right now, there are no national limits on carbon pollution that fossil fuel-fired power plants can put out into the air. There's not a single limit on it.
Well, no, but if those companies are able to put a meter and charge you for using those carbon dioxide or methane from the atmosphere, I'm sure that they will do it.
They'd find a way to then do it, because they could still make even a bigger profit. But and then we have the Environmental Protection Agency that has really tried to be, and again, this was through the Obama administration. He did try to put through the Clean Power Plan, and yet there's the bill today in our federal government that is trying to kill it. They are giving, again, I think it's over, I forgot the exact numbers, so I don't want to say it, but again, huge amounts of money to the oil industry, again, this year, and yet they're gutting renewable energy resources. They're gutting those plans and those subsidies. So in spite of that, though, the good news is that both solar and wind are becoming very competitive, because more and more people have begun to recognize that not only can they save money, but it's going to be a necessity. If we don't start converting our economy into a green economy, something that is going to provide for real sustainability, our economy is going to get even worse.
All I can say is this, that in the United States, there's no place on earth that shows you how conservation can improve the lives of everyone, the river, the forest, the air. No matter what you say about it, because if you have been to other countries in the world, well, you've been to China several times,
right.
And literally when I go there I suffocate because I just cannot breathe that thick smog. You see the rivers in foreign countries, you don't want to put your feet on it,
because you don't
because
even want to wash clothes in it. I mean, nothing should go into those rivers.
Several stories about that. So in any case, and you've seen what is happening in Africa, the forests and so on or in South America. So you see those, and those are areas and areas of the world, which is about almost all of part of the world, that don't have any sort of check on human activities.
There's no regulations. There are no...
People wash their clothes and defecate in the river or the oceans.
But then that's exactly why a lot of the multinational corporations go to those areas. When you look at what they have done in particularly South America, which is closest to us, when you look and you saw all those huge rainforests totally depleted and they're left with nothing, the fact that you destroy the land, the pollution that goes on, their water sources are contaminated, because when they're doing all of this and they're doing their mining, you get the chemical runoffs that then pollute the rivers. But this is also happening here.
Well, this is exactly my point. If there's anything that is really more important, that is going to have to be what we are doing to the planet, not why we're not conserving this or conserving that. Like I said, in the United States, we've done about as much as any, I would say, technically possible way of doing it. Our rivers are clean.
But they're not. I mean, when you look at what was happening even in New York, as close as New York, their reservoirs are being contaminated because of the fracking. It took the people of New York, the protesting that they did with the governor, to finally stop the fracking, because the amount of contamination that goes into our water supply, and it's not seen unless you get that what is it, the methane that gets into the water? Isn't that the only time you can smell it, or it sets on fire?
From the faucet. But that is exactly what I mean, you know, what we're doing to the environment or what we're doing to the earth. And like I said, if that is consciously objectionable to us because it is happening here in our backyard, you should think of what is happening outside of the United States.
Right.
You will see those.
It can be worse.
And in Africa, or, you know, in the Philippines, there's a gold mine there that everyone, it's a free-for-all. Everybody wants to get their hands on this gold, and they use mercury to extract the gold from the you know, soil and earth. And what do? They let the mercury run out. So,
but it's the same with our computers that were being sent to China.
Well,
with all those components that were in the
rare earth, they call it.
Right, but they were also contaminating everything.
That is a contaminant in the first place.
But these are all multinational corporations that are doing it. Do you think we will ever get to the point where there is a real conscience capitalism?
No, because that is the nature of the human beings,
so,
and that is to destroy everything that they can get their hands on. So the only way that you can do that is to limit the number of people that lives in a certain area, because if you limit the number of people in a certain area, then they cannot possibly contaminate everything.
You have to also eliminate the ability of multinational corporations to go in and extract what they think is the most valuable resource on that piece of land.
The demand is there to do that, to get those things. But the demand is there to extract oil from the earth. And why do you think that they're fracking the, you know, the shells and so on? That's because there is that big demand to get our hands on oil so we can burn it until we all die.
But wouldn't conscious capitalism make a lot more sense? Knowing all of these facts, these are not debatable facts, right? We know that these are facts. If you really had conscious capitalism and said that, okay, we know this is what we have to do to sustain life on Earth, so let's really support those industries that will provide the same benefits. We have alternatives to oil and gas. We have them today. Well, oil, gas, and coal. We have them today that will not create pollution, and you know, that will provide us with the same type of power. So why isn't that pushed?
Because you're asking for something that is of a higher level of intelligence, because people at this time, they really don't care about what tomorrow brings. All they care about is what can I do
You're
today
talking about our audience.
To catch the fish in the ocean. I don't care whether, you know, it's going out of, you know, in the Philippines, all the corals are all broken down. And you know, when I was a kid, we used to just throw dynamite into the ocean and numb all those big fish will get brain concussion, and you just pick them up. But who cares, you know? When you blow the dynamite under into the ocean, it breaks down the corals, and the coral takes hundreds of years to grow that beautiful shape. But nobody cares, because that is exactly what they want to do, because that is where the economy is. And it is the same thing as when we do fracking, and it's the same thing as when we dig oil. It's the same thing as when we do strip mining and cutting down on the woods and everything. So if you want to say, well, let's have the government apply regulation zone, that doesn't work. It never did. We have the Environmental Protection Agency. People still go down there and pollute the air and the water. So what is the solution there? Well, the solution depends on that 1%, or the 0.1% of the population. They have the means, they have the money, we are all in the same boat, and if we're going to breathe putrid type of air, they're gonna smell exactly the same air. So it will be at their best interest if they want to use their money to do something that would benefit the entire planet.
Okay, well, we kind of know what they want to do. Remember we read Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, and I would highly recommend that you you could go to the library and get the book, or but it was excellent. Naomi Klein.
We actually listened to her at one time, I think.
Yes, we were in New York,
and
she was the speaker.
Right.
But in her book, This Changes Everything, she talks about how we've gotten this far without actually doing anything. And she talked about Richard Branson and his wonderful idea. He was going to give $3 billion. He's one of those people that you're talking about, because Al Gore came to him. He showed him all the facts, and he said, yes, I mean, this is really something that I have to do. So he set up, he said he would devote, I think it was $3 billion he was going to donate to find a solution to this issue. Well, recently he was up in Canada, where the Keystone Pipeline originates from, because he's putting in a new airline the airport there. He's got a new route, so he came in there because he's very excited. I mean, that's another route for his airline. He came nowhere close to donating that amount of money. And instead, what he said was, well, I'll set up a fund for the first person that can come up with a solution as to how to get the carbon dioxide out of the air. So he announced that. I believe it was at the breaking ground for his airline route to that Canadian city. And he announced I think there were 11. None are even close to having production, but all the ideas were basically the same. They would have these great big vacuums that would suck the carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere. Well, what was really scary in the book was everybody knows that really won't work. And Naomi Klein describes the solution that 0.1%, that's 0.1% of the 1%, have come up with as the solution to the problem. Because we all know that the extinction event that occurred when the volcanoes all erupted and the sulfur went up into not the atmosphere but the stratosphere and blanketed the earth, and you all of a sudden had this cold event where we were an ice ball basically, and it was a major extinction event. Well, they thought, well, we could cover the earth. So they've got plans for these cannon type things that will shoot the sulfur into the stratosphere so that it would blanket, it would have a film around the earth. The effect of that could be that, yes, the earth would stop warming very quickly, but you would also never see a blue sky. We would have a white haze. But in doing this, computer models have already shown that when they decide to do this, you will have large swaths of land where you are basically committing genocide. The first one, obviously, was that the computer model showed that it would go from areas of the mid-African continent up through the Middle East into Asia. Wow, we're that close. Time is just flying by. And then at that point, you have, if they decide that, okay, they don't want to commit genocide in that area, if they had all these explosions of the sulfur from South America, the swath of land where they would have the biggest impact would be down the entire East Coast from Canada, the United States, into the Caribbean, where you would have storms that would make Sandy and what was the one in Louisiana? What was that hurricane would look like little rainstorms. So no matter what they decide to do, it's going to cause death and destruction somewhere on Earth. We do have, can I just ask our booth, are you ready to show the last video? We're all set? Okay. So before we close, we're getting kind of short on time, but we started with a humorous part of this very serious problem. But for the next 5 to 7 minutes, you really need to see this next video. and we'll be right back. I'm sorry? They're trying to give me some information. Oh, okay. All right. They're loading it up. But I think that...
Well, I would say that we have to think, and we are thinking about, well, we're really consuming all our natural resources. Well, not quite, because we do have a natural resource that's so abundant.
Which is?
Humans.
People. I knew you were going to say that. He can make any critical, horrible issue.
So, and there's nothing that science doesn't know about humans yet. So they can practically extract any rare elements
from us,
and use whatever we have.
Okay. They are ready to show the video,
All right.
so we'll be back right after. But please take these few minutes to watch this intelligent explanation.
What if all life on Earth could go extinct because of man-made climate change? It's hard to imagine Earth without life. We take life for granted, but life has not always flourished here. The Earth has experienced dramatic loss of life, or what we call mass extinctions, 5 times over the course of geologic history. Each one of these events has resulted in the loss of more than half of all life on Earth. And the largest and most devastating of all was the Permian mass extinction. Almost all life on Earth disappeared.
Permian mass extinction is, in essence, just the greatest crisis that life on Earth has ever suffered.
By the end of the Permian mass extinction, 95% of all life on the planet was dead. And why is this important today? Because today, a 6th extinction is underway, one that will test the survival of not just human civilization, but possibly of the human species itself. And it bears a horrifying resemblance to several previous global warming-driven events, like the Permian mass extinction.
I think it is certainly extremely significant that a lot of the main crises of the past are associated with global warming, and so with obvious implications for the present day.
When we think of extinctions, we think of the dinosaur-killing KT mass extinction, which was triggered by a sudden catastrophic collision with a meteorite. But the most deadly force behind all extinctions isn't from outer space. It's from underground, underwater, and under the ice, where trillions of tons of carbon lies in wait in the form of frozen methane. If this methane melts and is released into the atmosphere, it will produce a sudden and massive global warming. During the Permian mass extinction, greenhouse gases were released by volcanic eruptions in an area that is today called the Siberian Traps. These, along with the heat from the lava flow itself, warmed the atmosphere of the Earth by at least 6 degrees Celsius. That much global warming took a huge toll on land, animals, and plants, but far worse, it warmed the oceans enough that methane, frozen deep under the sea, melted and was released into the atmosphere. That enormous release of methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, pretty much doubled the level of global warming and killed off over 95% of all life, both on Earth and in the seas.
It's a kind of a scary thought, but maybe one of the best geological analogs for the kinds of rapid changes in climate and CO2 in the atmosphere that we're going to witness now and for the next few centuries, potentially, is this end Permian time when, as you know, that culminated in one of the largest mass extinctions that we know of.
And of course, looking at these ancient events shows us times of global warming, and the atmosphere doesn't care whether the carbon dioxide comes from human activity or from a volcano. It has the same end effects.
The numbers are very similar from some of the giant lava flows in Siberia. The amount of carbon dioxide they release is very similar to the sort of fossil fuel burning carbon dioxide release that we're doing sort of decade after decade today.
Today, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is above 400 parts per million, a level not seen any time in the history of human life on Earth
we are increasing CO2 levels in the atmosphere at rates far greater than any of the most rapid events that happened in the deep geological past. There is no precedent for what we are doing to the atmosphere. It is an uncontrolled experiment.
That was Dr. Michael Mann. We will pick up the last half of the video right after the break, but the point that we're making here, and prior to that, there were 3 other scientists. The point that we're making here is that there is a time bomb frozen in the seas and in the permafrost. This time bomb is called methane. We know of methane as natural gas. Methane is the result of the decomposition of plant matter over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years. And there are these beds of what's called methane clathrate or methane hydrate, these beds of frozen methane that are somewhere between 4 trillion tons and 10 trillion tons of methane around the world, an estimated 2.5 trillion tons in the Arctic. If you melt 2 trillion tons of methane, you have a mass extinction.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
So the question is, if we warm, how much must we warm the world before the oceans start melting that methane, and then it's too late?
Good idea. I think methane.
Wait a minute. Our sound is, we've got an echo. Are we okay now? Are we better? No, we have to wait a minute. Sorry. Okay.
Well, methane is going to be our salvation, because that's going to be the next fuel source when we exhaust all the oil.
Well,
and there are more methane that we can dig out from under the oceans and everything. And that's going to give us maybe a couple of million years.
We have, like I said, we have the methane clouds, almost every oil
We just
rig.
don't know how to use it.
We don't know how to but they do know how to capture it. Rather than let it just go up in the atmosphere, they just don't want to do that.
Supply and demand.
Because it's too expensive.
Well, exactly.
So
But,
maybe
when these oil companies come up with a way to package methane and in small, tiny packages and sell it to every household, then you can see.
Before that happens, Ben, I know that
this methane out there.
No, I know before that happens. I mean, China, knowing how bad their air quality is, that they have worked very hard at doing solar. You have some countries now. I know it's one of the Scandinavian countries, but they are almost all.
Germany, accordingly.
And Germany
has practically have natural energy, wind and solar.
They subsidized it.
The use of fossil fuel.
Yes, it surpassed the use of fossil fuel. I mean, it can easily be done. And if we were smart, if we had intelligent legislators that said, okay, our economy is in trouble, we can build our economy by using our American ingenuity, come up with the solar cells that are needed, you know, but...
Well, a word to our listener. Like they used to say in the 1950s, you know, go plastic young man. This is going to be go methane young man.
No,
so
not
go to
methane,
college,
because you still have, stop, because you
learn
know.
methane engineering,
You still
because
have,
that is the
as soon
future.
as you are still burning a fossil fuel. Natural gas is still a fossil fuel. And so it is not the solution to climate change. It certainly could be a solution when the oil companies run out of oil. They'll just kind of change their rigs or do whatever, and we'll have more natural gas. It is still a fossil fuel.
But we'll use them all, Bunny. It's no different than in Easter Island when they chop down all the
I know.
trees.
That is like the most ridiculous story. I think we've told you about that before when we were on Easter Island, and everyone knows that, you know, you have they had cut down all of the trees on the island, so they had absolutely no sustainable growth of trees at all. And the last time we visited, we couldn't believe it. We were riding around the island, and there on the coast, they were digging up the rock and making it into the gravel and exporting it because it apparently is good for what?
Making roads.
Making roads. So if you live on a rock and you chop up that rock to sell it, you have to really consider what you're doing. And I think that that's the analogy that we're making, that if you, we're chopping up the rock we live on, we won't have anything to live on.
Well, we still do, because like I said, we get a natural resource that it's just growing by leaps and bounds. So Soylent Green.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I do apologize for my being late, but next week we have a representative from Represent Us who's going to talk about where we are not being represented. So I think that we will come back to this topic of climate change again because it is necessary. As you see legislation that's being passed, it's really up to you and I to actually let them know we oppose certain pieces of legislation when it is impacting the life of the planet, basically.
And don't forget Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather and May 2nd fight. So if you have a way of seeing it, unfortunately, it's pay-per-view, and that's going to be some fight to see.
Okay. And thank you for being with us this evening, and we'll see you next week.
And thank you and goodbye.